answer to that. There we go. Everybody click that. When is the library not a library? When it's a community hub. And so I want to talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. In all my years of working with municipalities, so I've been an employee twice at different municipalities, plus I've been a consultant for 20 years, always had municipal clients. It seems to me that road maintenance, winter road maintenance, summer road maintenance, always bubbles to the top of the list of the most important things. So just recognize that you're competing with road maintenance in terms of getting your council's attention and getting budget dollars. Not saying that's fair or right, but just understand that it is always sort of the #1 priority in most municipalities. Preparation, a couple of things I just want to quickly highlight here is make sure that you're going in with a clear purpose. What is it you want this presentation to do? And what is your desired outcome? Do you want more funding? Do you want extra FTEs? Do you need some sort of other resource? What is it that you're asking of your council? And always keep that in mind around what your desired outcome is. Know your audience. So as with any group of people, when they get together, there's going to be people who love you and people who are meh, and some people who might be actively opposed to libraries for whatever reason. So just understand who's on council, who's a fan, who's not a fan, and then prepare yourself accordingly so that you know if you get a question from Councillor Smith, you know that this person is generally opposed to any sort of increase for libraries, so you may want to be more prepared to answer those tough questions. Know your protocol in terms of presenting at council, and if you've done that before, you know what that's about. Make sure you adhere to your time limit. And I always like to make sure that there's handouts or some sort of follow-up that goes out with the council package, so that the councillors are not just relying on your presentation, that they've got some hard copy information that they can refer to as they further their consideration of whatever request you have. And I'm doing this in the context of budget, because it's you know, the most wonderful time of the year right now, budget time. Yay. But I know there might be other times at which you present to council as well. So, but for purposes of this discussion, we're going to pretend that this is your annual pitch at budget. Practicing is the best way to you'll be smooth with your presentation. I like to memorize my openings so that I can just quickly move from you know, the opening right into the meat of it, and it sort of prepares me that I don't have to think about what am I going to say first. So if you can do that, memorize the first couple of sentences is always good advice. Practice out loud, practice saying the words out loud so that you can get used to the pace and the cadence of your remarks. Anybody who's ever had the pleasure of listening to Barack Obama speak, that man has cadence down pat, and people understand what he's, you know, what his approach is, but he's just mesmerizing to listen to. So I'm not suggesting we can all be Barack Obama, but you just think about your pace. How quickly are you speaking? If people are sort of struggling to keep up with you, you might want to slow down. If they're sort of hemming and hawing and tapping their watch or whatever, then you might want to speed up a little bit. So just watch for some body language cues. Key messages, you want to make sure that you've got 2 to 3 main messages that you're trying to get across to your council today, not the history of your library since it began, or the history of libraries in the world all the way back to, you know, 1000 BC, whatever. You want to get a very honed sense of key messages around what is it your purpose is today, what is it you're trying to get across to your council, and really use those frequently. We want to use clear, plain language. So watch the jargon and the acronyms, things like TRAC and some of those other things that you folks are all really accustomed to. You might have to explain what that is. Don't read your slides. So I'm kind of reading my slides, but not really. This really means don't have paragraphs of information. If you have a few bullets like this as prompts for your remarks, that's better than having it all written out. If you have too much information on the slide, people will read ahead. They're not listening to you, and nobody likes to group read. And then always make sure you end with some sort of call to action. So back to your purpose for being there that day. What is it you want to leave council with? Leave them with an action item. We're looking forward to your support of our new proposal. We're looking forward to your support for our plan of service or our 2023 work plan, whatever it is that you're there for, whatever the purpose is, end with that. So you've given them something to take away and understand that, oh yeah, this is what these people wanted. Answering questions is a bit of a tough thing to do sometimes. So again, preparation. If you folks have presented before to your municipal council, you can anticipate the kind of questions that you typically get. If you're making a specific ask for something that's outside of perhaps, say the budget guideline, perhaps the municipality has a 2% increase and you need 2.5, you can anticipate a lot of questions around that. And so you just want to be prepared with ready answers. You don't want to be so smooth that it's disingenuous, but you want to be able to answer promptly and confidently when you're being asked these kinds of questions. Countering objections is a different thing. And the story I told on Wednesday real quickly is, you know, if you've ever been in a furniture store and there's a high pressure salesperson who's trying to sell you something, they always have an answer for whatever objection you might make to this particular item. So for example, if you're shopping for a couch and the one you're looking at is you've measured it's too big for your room, they're going to say, oh, well, why don't you buy 2 love seats? And then you'll have a nice little conversation nook. And before you know it, you're like, ooh, conversation nook. I want one of those. You don't even know what it is, but you want one. That's what they do. So when you encounter an objection from your councillors, they may make it in the form of a statement instead of a question. So they may say things like, well, we all know that you know, visits to libraries are down dramatically. Numbers of library cards memberships are down dramatically. And so why should we consider your request? Don't let that sit there. Make sure you counter their objection. So before you answer their question, go back to that statement and say, I just want to go back to what you said about visits are down. In fact, they're not, they're up. And that's why we need extra staff or whatever. So make sure that sometimes it's not intuitive to respond to a statement, but you really want to be thinking about that, because those things, if they're left unanswered, then people walk away going, yeah, how come library traffic is down? Like, why isn't anybody going to the library? So you don't want to leave that hanging. Definitely use facts and figures, but you folks are the masters of telling stories. And so make sure you've got some really great examples that illustrate, again, back to your purpose for being there, really great examples that illustrate how libraries are going to help the municipality solve its problems, reach its goals, or illustrate how your request, whether it's an increase in budget, increase in FTE, or even these days you have to make a request to keep the status quo. Make sure you've got some really great stories about how libraries helped turn a teen's life around, or really helped a mom and a toddler connect, and now, you know, they're both lifelong readers, or whatever you've got going on. Make sure you tell those memorable stories, because people will remember that a lot more than the numbers. Numbers are important, absolutely, but you want to make sure that you're connecting with people at the heart level. And so sometimes it's those stories that are the most memorable, and people go, you know what, I have a grandson and I really want him to develop a lifelong love of books. So I'm going to support this because I feel it's important, or whatever. So make sure that you're doing, you've got a sort of a host of stories available to you. On Wednesday, I told the story about, and those of you who heard this, bear with me, but I told the story about hearing Stephen Lewis speak. He was the former UN ambassador to Africa during the AIDS crisis at the early 2000s. And I heard him speak, and he started his speech with a whole bunch of numbers about facts and figures, how the AIDS crisis in sub-Saharan Africa basically wiped out the middle generation. So there were grandparents and there were grandchildren, but there were no parents. They had all died from AIDS. And he had all these kinds of numbers. I heard this 20 years ago. couldn't tell you a single number, but he told a really compelling story. He said that he was walking through a village, and there was some grandmothers who had a stand of cabbages for sale. And he made some comment about, oh, it looks like you're going to do some good business here today. What will you do with the money you make? And one of the grandmothers said, we buy coffins. There's never enough coffins for the parents who were dying from AIDS. Like, that stuck with me for 20 years. Not the numbers, but the story. So this is where the power of storytelling really illustrates itself. And I just use a story to tell you how storytelling is memorable. So I hope that that is helpful to you, to really think about those impactful stories that you all have. I know you do. You hear from people every day around, how something at the library changed their life. A teen who discovered a career path, or an unemployed single mom found an online course for retraining, and she's now going to be able to get a better job. Those kinds of stories, I think that they really help to illustrate the impact that libraries have. And those of you who may have been following the library budget cuts that are happening in St. Albert, I happen to live in St. Albert. In Wednesday's Gazette, the local newspaper, there was a really great letter to the editor from a citizen in support of libraries, who absolutely nailed the key messages. I'm just going to read a couple of sentences here to you. St. Albert's Library is more than a place to borrow books. It is a place where community comes together. It offers a mix of services and programs that serve all age groups. Some of these services help employers find employees, help residents find jobs. Our library helps high school students and post-secondary students with research, resources, a safe place to study, and meet with others to work on their projects. Like, that's the kind of thing, that's the illustration that you have to give to your council to help them understand. For some of them, maybe the last time they were in a library was when they were in elementary school. And so they don't know how libraries have evolved over the past 30 years. So you need to draw out some of those statements around it's the so what of libraries. It's not that the library is there and it has materials. It's so what does that do for people? And it's those kinds of stories that will have the greatest impact on councillors. So it was remarkable to me that somebody wrote in and nailed the key messages in my mind around the impact that libraries have. So I would encourage you to think about that for yourself, and then make sure that you're sprinkling in those real world stories about things that have happened. Will go a long way to help win your councillors over. So that's just a quick overview of what we did on Wednesday. Does anybody have any questions or comments at this point? I really want to make this interactive, so feel free to just pipe up, or use the raise hand function at the bottom or the chat, and we'll call on you. Can I give an example of a call to action? A call to action is simply, I am asking for your support today to approve our request to whatever you're searching for. Like, you actually make the ask as part of your closing. So a call to action is, I'm asking for your support today for our budget request that's in front of you, because it will do these things for our community. So you just have to be bold. And you'll notice, back to my road maintenance guys, they're never shy about saying, a budget increase will add another cycle of snow removal to the community, right? They're not shy. So don't you be shy. You have to be just forthright with your, your call to action. What is it you want them to do? Okay, so those are the questions in the chat. Does anybody have anything they want to chat about all this stuff? Comments? Not yet? Okay. So that's kind of the background. You will have received, if you haven't already, this presentation that we prepared at YRL to help you, make a solid pitch to your council. And that's really what you're doing. You're trying to make a business case for whatever request you have in front of them. So you can use this template, you can use your own, there's no branding in it because this was meant to be more generic. So the actual presentation, you're able to put in your own title. I just pop something in here for the sake of it. But we want to use really clean, clear graphics. We want to make it really compelling and something that people want to look at, not too many words on a screen. So this diagram is also something that we created for YRL, and it talks about how libraries are community hubs and talks about the different kinds of things that people get from their library. So this text here is really more for your use. You can take it out, replace it with something else, but it was just to give you a context of what this was meant to do. So I think this is where you want to draw in some of your examples that you're going to present to council. So, you know, libraries have materials for people to enjoy. So libraries about fun. There's fun stuff. There's movies, there's video games, there's music, there's, you know, fiction, there's whatever you want. You know, there's things for people to do and enjoy. Skill and job training resources. You know, we help people get employed. Access to free computers, let them take online courses. So there's a whole wealth of stuff here that really serves a population that perhaps doesn't have computer resources at home, or even the job skill kinds of training that that they need for their advancing their career. Local collections and events. The only place you're going to find the history of Edson probably is at the Edson Public Library. And that's fabulous, because those local collections that can tie back to the community is really important for people. I think they want to know the history of their community, and they want to know, you know, what came before them. And so, you know, that's something your local library will have that other libraries may not. Social connections and access. And this one, for me, is really a key one that you can draw on. You can think about other sectors as well. So we know that during the pandemic, at the beginning, when everything shut down, people were just going crazy because they were stuck in their houses and there was no place to go. And of course, some of the first things that opened up besides stores were libraries. And libraries were really that safe space to make connections with people, to see people you haven't seen because you've been locked in your house, and have that social hub that happens. And I think there's this misperception that because we have the internet, or you have an e-reader, you never have to go to a library. You don't have to leave your house. You can, you know, just stay there and download books. But truly, people want to be around other people. They want to have that social connection. And so I think it's really important that we illustrate that, because I know stories that I've heard from some libraries is that, man, after the doors opened after the pandemic, there were people just, you know, anxious to get back in the library, be amongst other people, be in a safe space where they know that they can bring their families and you know, just enjoy other people's company. The sort of parallel that you can draw for your council is that there was a prediction during the pandemic that because online shopping took off, that, you know, stores would close and we wouldn't need them anymore. But that's simply not true. Stores are adapting, and I follow the retail industry quite closely. They're adapting, but they're not all closing. Some have, but not all of them, for sure, because shopping is a social activity. You go with your family, you go with a friend, you have lunch somewhere. And so it's these social connections that people are seeking out. And that's a really great role for libraries to play in the community as those sort of central community hubs. And certainly we see that in a lot of the smaller communities. It's even more important because there aren't as many locations that a family can go necessarily, and for free. I mean, there's no charge to walk into your library and sit with your children and read a book, which is amazing to me. Reading, writing, and understanding, aka literacy, trying to use some plain language here, but I mean, the role that libraries play in supporting literacy among all age groups, from toddlers to seniors, is really critical. And I think that there are resources and help, and librarians are brilliant at bringing people together with those resources and helping them find their way. So that's another aspect that libraries bring to the community. Health and wellness resources, really big, especially again through the pandemic. People not only wanted to learn more about pandemics and coronavirus and all that other junk, but mental health became really critical and still is critical as people face job burnout and they're trying to develop coping mechanisms and so forth. So these resources become really big. And the difference is with libraries is that there's a trust factor there that just isn't there with the internet. Dr. Google is not always your best resource. But there's a trust factor that libraries bring to this. So again, you can think about presenting that to your council and saying, we're credible. We have materials that are trustworthy and people can come into the library and check these things out. So I think that that's really important. The idea that you customize local workshops and programs for your community, knowing the demographics there. If there's a large seniors population, you might have more seniors programs. If it's a younger family community, you might have younger family programs. So I think this little wheel here is really meant for you to think about as a resource, all the ways you can demonstrate that libraries are indeed community hubs and that they make a difference in a community, and really try and help counselors shift their thinking from it's a place you go to take out a book, the classic misperception, to libraries are a happening place and they're fun and they're not the old environment they used to be. I mean, people go there and there's kids that are laughing, no kidding. And like there's this whole mindset, this whole misperception that I know you folks have been battling with for many, many years. So it's just a way to, as an infographic to bring that to your council and say, let me tell you all the things that libraries do. And yes, we do check out books, by the way, but this is all of what we do. So I don't know how people feel about this. Does that resonate for you? Does this seem like a useful tool? Comments, questions? Anybody have experience with trying to sell some of these messages before with their counselors and how that's gone over?
I have a question for you there, Sue.
Sure.
Is this the good time when we're doing the budget presentation to go over return on investment to our councils?
Absolutely. And I think that that's what this demonstrates in a soft sense. If you're going to do the hard numbers, I would encourage you to do both. What's the return on investment from a hard numbers perspective, which I know counselors are going to want, but then this is the soft return. Having a community where people want to live, where they want to start a business, where they want to raise their families, those are objectives for every municipality. And so this is what libraries do to contribute to that. So for me, that's the return on investment. Oh, you're on mute, Hank.
Trying to unmute myself at the same time as trying to talk to you. It doesn't work very well. I just want to know, it's not really a question for you, but I think it's a question for Jessica. And that is, can we get YRL's helping actually getting our ROIs?
Sorry, just finding my unmute button. So Hank, that is an excellent question. And for those of you who are members of YRL, I know there's a few guests here. We have prepared ROIs for your return on investment to YRL. We haven't tabulated all of the data for library specific ROIs. However, we do have some expertise in pulling that kind of data and can certainly offer libraries guidance in how to develop an ROI of their own library's contributions to the community. And I wanted to add one more thing. I'm just looking at this graphic here, Sue, and again, for our non-YRL guests, I think that this graphic is probably easy enough. It won't look quite as polished, but easy enough to pull together in sort of a Microsoft tools type thing. And those points that you've made there are certainly applicable to every library. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Hank, is there a follow-up?
Well, I could spend all my time with you, Sue, but I think I better leave some room for other people to ask questions as well. So
Did I answer your question, Hank?
you did. I
Okay.
think we actually have some already, Jessica, for some towns, I believe.
Sure, yeah.
It's been I've been part of that as well. It's
Yeah,
just that I think we should have a slide for that. And also coming up with these how can I say, graphics is a little bit of trouble. At least for me it would be, but again,
we can support you with that. That's no problem. I just want to encourage you all to have a look at the chat. Our CEO is actually on this call right now and probably far better positioned to answer these questions than me, but she's putting a few comments in the chat for folks as well. So definitely check that out.
Yes, and I know Carla and I have spoken before about some of the ROI approaches and formulations and so forth that you folks do. So yeah, it's all really good information. It's a really hard balance when you have what is a soft service versus a hard service. Hard services being things like infrastructure, community protection, that kind of stuff. Those are hard services. When you've got soft services, and we've done a lot of work with FCSS AA as well, and they're in the same boat. How do you quantify ROI on something that never happens? And for them, they're in the preventive social service business, and so they're challenged as well.
Yeah, just to tell you a little bit of what Hinton does is we're between the fire and the police department when it comes to our budgets, and so like any way that we could stand out a little bit of the services that people really think are totally necessary within the town would definitely help out.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes you can just use like sort of graphic illustrations. So imagine your city has only roads and fire stations and an RCMP outlet and shopping, and that's it. There's nothing else. Is that a community you would want to live in? So there's no recreation because they're in the same boat, soft service, no recreation, no libraries, nothing that supports the health and well-being of people. Is that a community you want to live in? And for me, it's kind of like the difference between being, the difference between a store and a warehouse is people. So the difference between a community with these amenities and without it are these services. And this really is what contributes to quality of life. I don't know anybody who would say categorically that a smooth road that has no potholes is their idea of quality of life. It's important, but I don't think that they would say, I'm moving to Hinton because they have 0 potholes. I think they're going to say, I'm going to move to Hinton because there's great scenery and there's lots of things to do and they have a fabulous library, right? Like, so it's about those things that really make a community attractive to people. And that's where you hang your hat on the economic development goals of your municipality. How do you get more businesses? How do you get more people to move to your community? You give them the amenities and the services that they value.
Thank you.
Awesome. Oh, yes. So I'm not sure who mentioned this. Is this Carla? This is Carla. She says in the chat, if your fire department does a bang up job, no pun intended, of presenting to their council, why not buy them a coffee and figure out what they did? Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, absolutely learn from others and see if there's something else you can learn. And then also look to your sort of fellow soft services like your FCSS department, some of the other recreation, that kind of thing, where people would say, is a rec center an essential service? When you think like garbage collection, fire protection, those are essential services. Is a rec center an essential service? Most people would say no, but again, what does it add to your community? Same thing with a library. You know, if a library is not considered an essential service, then what kind of place would that be? And I think that you can do a lot with that. Yes, libraries certainly became an essential service in Jasper. That is a brilliant point, Jessica. We should try and connect with those folks and see, what stories they can tell, because they became the only place in town where people could access the internet and charge their phones. And I mean, talk about essential. Yeah, really good point. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Okay. So just some things, this is around positioning the library and thinking about it in a different way, because again, people approach things from their own point of view. If I said to you, Hank, you and I are going to go to a wedding this weekend, we're guests at a wedding on Saturday, immediately what pops in your head?
Okay, where the hell's my suit and how am I going to get it pressed before tomorrow?
Right. But you're also thinking it's going to be at a church, and then there's going to be a reception, and there's going to be a wedding cake and flowers, right? You've got a perception. What if I told you it was a pool party? All of a sudden you're going, wait a minute, that's not a wedding.
That definitely is not a wedding, no.
But it could be. And so what I'm saying is that everybody brings their own personal history, their own relationship to things, to certain paradigms. And when you think about a library, is truly, if you've not been in a library lately, and I know it's hard for you folk because you're in libraries all the time, but for those who haven't, they've got this sort of 1962 impression of what a library is and stuck in their mind, and they're struggling to figure out, why are libraries even relevant? Like, why do we even have them anymore? Back to, we have the internet, we have e-readers, we don't need libraries. So I think that's where you really need to take the opportunity to demonstrate some of these things to show the impact that libraries have and that they absolutely are relevant. I think that that's going to go a long way, because you have to shift those people who've not been in a library since they were in grade 6 to today's environment. They're just not aware. It's like driving a 1962 Chevy, doesn't even have power windows or locks or air conditioning, and then you go and put them in a 2022 vehicle and it's got all the bells and whistles. That's the difference. And we have to get people there. We have to help them to understand that libraries have absolutely evolved over the years and remain 100% relevant. I know that that's an ongoing challenge, and you've probably all answered the question before, but I'd love to hear some of your responses. Explain to me, now that we have the internet, why libraries are relevant. I'd love to hear some examples of how you answer that, because I know you all have. Anybody want to offer a thought around why libraries are still relevant? If your counselor said to you, I'm going to pick on you, Lana, why is your library relevant? Why should I care? Are you prepared to answer that question?
Okay. Well, I would say we just moved into a brand new building. So our council has been quite supportive recently, so that's a good thing. But I would say the biggest thing right now is the accessibility. We were in a basement of a building and now we're on a main floor. So now our library is accessible to everyone. So that would be the types of stories that I probably would tell.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you. And apologize, I picked on you.
That's okay.
I know you guys have all done this, and far be it from me to try and, tell you what's what. I want you to share with each other around what's worked for you before. When you get challenged with those people who say, I can't support any increase to a library because I just don't see how they're relevant. I want you to, anybody else have a story to tell? Seeing everybody here. Don't be shy or I'm going to pick on you. Nobody wants to share. Okay, well, that's fair. Just think about it. Think about being prepared to answer those sort of fundamental questions around, why do we even need a library? And again, I would ground you in what's happening in St. Albert. They're being hit with a massive budget decrease to the point where they've said that, their operations might not be sustainable. But for the grace of God, go I, kind of thing. So be prepared to answer those fundamental questions around why libraries are important, why they're relevant, what they do for the community. I think that that's, you can never say that stuff enough. Oh, someone in the chat. Can you send a link to the St. Albert Library response? I can send you, a link to the story. Sure can. Yeah. Yeah. I think that I think that it's going to be increasingly challenging, particularly as municipalities deal with decreasing revenues and so forth. They look for places, path of least resistance to cut funding. And again, thinking about our road people who usually eat up a good lion's share of the budget, they're also, one of the more popular services that councillors hear the most complaints about if it's not done right. And so they tend not to go those places, even though you could shave 1% off a road budget, not really make much impact, but 1% off a library budget is a lot. So I feel like, sometimes services like libraries, FCSS can become sort of easy targets in some ways because they just don't have the public outcry. And a lot of times councillors, are influenced by, numbers of calls to their office that day. Like I can remember working on budgets in past years where, if you're talking budget at the end of November and there's a heavy snowfall that day, well, guess what's going to be important? It's really hard to think about a spring flower planting program that brings joy to the, flower barrels on Main Street that bring joy to people when there's a heavy snowfall that day. And so it's context. It's all around what else is going on in the community at that time. So just to be aware of. I know some of you present your year-to-date results or your year-over-year results, however you do that. So I want to encourage you to think about your statistics with a view to creating some infographics and charts. And the last time somebody asked, where can we get the infographics created? I mentioned Canva. I have not used Canva personally because I have a fantastic graphic designer. So I'm like, why would I? But my understanding is it's relatively easy to use. Failing that, you can look to a graphic designer. We'll help you. I think we can help you out if you want that kind of thing. But my point is really about making sure that you're presenting the material in the most memorable, compelling way that you can. So you want to, use a lot of charts and bar graphs and stuff and trend over time, like numbers of library memberships, trend them over time so people can see that it's going like this and it's going up. Number of items borrowed, programs offered, even, the kinds of things that you do for all ages is really good too, to demonstrate the breadth of programming that you have. I'm just going to pop to the chat here. Okay, thank you for sharing that story. So just because put the story in the from the Gazette about the library cuts. It'll be interesting to watch actually what happens with St. Albert and whether or not they actually go through with this massive cut that they're looking at. Anyway, we digress. So make sure that you're using a lot of really compelling diagrams to illustrate your point. It's better than words. People will remember a pie chart that is mostly this and a little of that rather than the numbers. So think about presenting your statistics in an interesting and compelling way. I think if you can share these stories and about the impacts for people, also consider inserting, if you can, if you have the technical capability, a little 5 or 7 second testimonial video clip from somebody saying, you know what, I use the library all the time. It is, it's changed my life and so on and so forth. Video is better than just putting quotes on a slide, but if quotes on the slide is all you can do, that's fine too. But a little 5-second video clip is easy to get. People can use their phone. It doesn't have to be a lot of equipment and fuss like it was in the olden days. Now it's quite easy to do. And again, it's more compelling to hear from an actual resident about the impact. And Hank says, since we have more library card holders coming and using our libraries, how do we show this in an infographic? Yeah, so that's where you can trend it over time. I would do year over year, go back and do like a 5-year history or whatever you have at hand in terms of statistics and show the graphic over time. You can use people, stacks of books. You can just use a bar graph. You know, I think that showing that trending is really a critical thing because people can relate to trending charts and they can see where things are going. Does that help, Hank? Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna flip here.
Just a little bit more on that is that we always, I try not to say patrons of the library because that limits our people that we serviced, and it gets our counselors thinking that we only service. We have a town of 10,000 and we have 2,700 card holders. And so that's basically a third of the population. And then it says, well, why do you need so much money if you're only servicing a third of the population? So some ideas of how to find an infographic on that, stating that we are more than just the people that come in and have cards, right?
Yep, 100%. So that's where you can track number of items borrowed or programs offered and attendance at programs. So you can say, you know, this past year we held 10 different programs at our library and we had 300 people attend those 10 programs or what have you. So I think there's other ways to show that. If you have any kind of traffic counter at your library, even if you manually, I'm sorry, even if you do it manually for like a month, you can extrapolate. Pardon me while I go.
I can definitely say that I've had to stop mid-meeting to attend to my dog. We've all been there, Sue.
I am so sorry about that. And I thought, oh, you know, he's just gonna behave himself, and then of course he didn't.
But you have to reward us with a quick shot of the dog. We want to see him. It's too late now.
It is. He's
Okay.
Put him outside. My apologies, folks. I really apologize for that. But yeah, and I think that you know, back to this breadth of audience that you have, I think there's a perception too that sometimes libraries are only for families of young children. So if that's the perception in your community, you know, get some pictures of a teen gaming night, get some pictures of a seniors, you know, book club. That kind of thing, so that you could show the breadth of impact within the community as well. Those kinds of things doesn't always have to be an infographic. Sometimes just images will help, particularly if people can see their neighbor or their friend or, you know, a relative, you know, going, oh, that's cool. I didn't know Joe was part of the seniors book club. So there's lots of different ways to illustrate this. And like I say, for me, I would put the numbers in a report or a leave behind. And use your presentation to show the visual side of libraries. I think that creates more impact. And then afterward, if the counselors want to go back and reflect on it, they have the numbers and so on. And you can, that's where you can match up the image that you used or the infographic with the detailed stats side by side so they can see it. And then it would really resonate with them. Any other thoughts, anything else that's worked for you when you've tried to sort of encapsulate your year in review, if you do that sort of thing?
Sue, we talked a little bit about this before the meeting started, but the importance of relating what we do in the library to the strategic plan of the municipality. Maybe I know that's something you reiterated about 6 or 7 times on Wednesday. Can you give us a little bit more of a concrete maybe example or how this has worked for you and municipalities in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I love to do is to take the municipal goal, objective, strategic pillar, whatever your community calls it, put it on the screen and then illustrate how this service supports the achievement of that. Because my experience with councils and even senior administrators like CAOs is that, you know, it's one thing to put the plan together. It's another thing to how do you actually make it come true? So you say, one of our strategic goals is to be the best community in central Alberta to raise a family. Cool. What does that look like? So if that's the kind of wording you have, put that right on the screen and then say, we can help you with this. We will give you tangible markers that will demonstrate how we're helping you move that needle. We've got attendance figures. We've got library card owners. We can do demographic deep dives into who owns a library card. You know, that kind of thing that helps to really illustrate the point. So I think that really linking to your municipal agenda is going to be very helpful to you. And it's really all about the old, what's in it for me? But in this case, it's what's in it for your counselor, and what hot button issue is your counselor trying to fight on. If you've got somebody who's been banging the drum about, and again, I keep picking on economic development because my work with smaller municipalities has always been, we need to get more businesses in town. But if that's the drum to beat, then absolutely go and find you know, ways to illustrate that. Go talk to recently established businesses and say, you know, what do you look for in a town when you moved here? And was a library on your list of things? I bet you it was. I was trying to find a statistic. You guys are librarians, so you probably can find it faster than me. I read somewhere years ago that there was a list of things that businesses looked for when relocating. And on that list, very highly up was libraries. I don't know, Jessica, if you're familiar with what I'm talking about. I apologize. I searched, but I couldn't find it. But that's the kind of thing you want to illustrate. So if you want to attract business to this town, well, guess what? One of the reasons that people come to a town or move a business is because it has a library. So that's a really, Carla. Hi, boss.
Hey, I finally figured out how to make everything work. That's what you alluded to, Sue, came from Todd Hirsch, Alberta Treasury Branch overview and environmental scan. And I have the list and the references in our work that I can send out either in chat, or people here can reach out to me and I'll send you the entire document.
Brilliant. I knew I'd seen it somewhere. Thank you, Carla.
You're welcome.
I think that's like a third-party endorsement of libraries. And it's somebody like Todd Hirsch, who's got a really high profile, although I know he's leaving ATB, but he's got a really high profile. Did you not know that, Carla? Yeah, he's leaving ATB. You know, he's got a lot of credibility and trust factor within the community. And so if you can use somebody like that's got a high profile who's saying, here's the top 10 reasons why a business will relocate to a community. And oh, look at that, number 3 on the list, it's a library. And I mean, that goes a long way to helping your municipal council fulfill its mandate. And it's almost like you're throwing down, you're saying, look, you know, you've got this pillar, economic development. We can help you. Why won't you let us help you? Don't say those words, but do you know what I'm saying? It's almost like you can say, make the case for them that we're the ones who can help you achieve your municipal goals. And Hank was mentioning just before we started that he looked through his municipal council's strategic plan and found all kinds of things that libraries do to support those goals. So I'd really encourage you to think about that and cherry pick those statistics to include with your year in review. Nobody says you have to report on the same thing every year. I think you have the latitude to, you know, if there's something that's really going to move the needle for you, is just to think about how to present that. Any other comments on you know, your year in review or your year-end statistics or anything else that's worked for folks? Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is your 2023 plan. So if you're going into council right now, you're looking for budget for 2023. You're going to want to be able to really succinctly help your council understand what your plan of service is about. And again, think about using some infographics or icons or something that really bring your plan of service to life. Try to avoid long sentences and lots of jargon, and talk more about outcomes than outputs. So in other words, talk about the so what, not necessarily just the numbers. You can say, you know, our plan is to increase our hours of service, and that means 100 more people a month can access library services. That's the so what of the increased hours, right? So don't just stop at, we're going to increase our hours of service. So what does that mean for people? And if you can do that, I think that that really also helps sort of bring your plan of service to life. We've talked about this, supporting municipal priorities. Again, this is where I would put in that absolute link to your strategic plan, and then show how you're going to, you know, help council meet its obligations. Testimonials, I mentioned it briefly before. I just want to reiterate, you can bring in either quotes from people, little video clips, a photo with a quote, anything that brings the residents to life in support of libraries, I think is a really great way to demonstrate that impact, that so what. It's not you that's just saying libraries are important. You've got all these people who are lined up. And like I say, for me, this article that I got out of the Gazette kind of blew me away. I don't know who this person is or if she's connected to the library in any way, but my gosh, if you can get somebody to reinforce your key messages like that, that's just worth its weight in gold. So, you know, there's a way to bring in those testimonials, those endorsements, but make sure that it's not just, I like my library. It's got to be, you know, working with my librarian or working with the library staff. I discovered X and it helped me do Y. Do you know what I mean? Like, be more specific if you can with people. And I find that it can be a little bit intimidating to ask somebody to share a testimonial, but honestly, people are quite open to it. We do it a lot in our business. And you just ask them, you say, if you know somebody who's a regular patron at your library, just ask them, you know, we're putting together a presentation to council. We're a bit concerned about, you know, maintaining our level of funding. You know, would you agree to, you know, being videotaped for like a 5-second clip, or contributing a sentence or two that we can use in our report? Those kinds of things. They'll be quite open to it. And those who are willing to do it, you can even take them anonymously if they prefer. So you can just call them a library patron or a member of the community if they don't want their name there for written ones. And I just realized suddenly we're at time. Oh my gosh, Jessica, where did this time go? Wow. Outline your budget requirements and make sure you know your numbers. I know this is something that you folks are really good at, but I have to say that I was super impressed with Carla's presentation to the YRL board on the budget, because she just had her numbers at the tips of her fingers, probably because she was immersed in it for so long. I don't know, but it's really impressive when you can see somebody with that confidence to answer the questions, you know, and without hesitation. So make sure you know your numbers, and then close with that strong ask, which is, I'm asking you today to support our request for X. And then that's the end of the presentation. And it's 2:29.
So you didn't run out of time at all. Thank you very much, Sue. And thank you to everyone who's been chatting in the chat. There's some good resources that have been posted there, so definitely check that out. Any final questions for Sue before we wrap things up?
Or any comments, anything you want to share? Yeah.
Anecdotes or stories?
No, I hope this was in some small way helpful to you. I'm a big fan of libraries. We've done work with libraries since 2002, Carla, I want to say, when we worked for TAL ages ago.
Try 1997, Sue, or 1993 and 5 and 6. And if you want to factor Dean's involvement in with the Alberta Library, then you have to go back to about 1996.
Yeah. So anyway, we're big fans. And so I really want to thank you for your time today. And just know that if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, you can do so. You can get a hold of Jessica. She can pass on my contact information to you. If there's somebody who wants to bounce an idea or an approach off me, happy to help you in any way I can.
Great. Well, once again, Sue, on behalf of YRL, we want to thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. This was incredible. For our participants, we'll be following up probably Monday with a link to the recording of this session as well as the handouts. I did pop a link to the handout in the chat. I don't know if it worked for you guys, but we'll make sure that it gets in your hands here. Best of luck, everyone, with your upcoming budget presentations. We know how challenging those can be. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everybody.